Big welcome everybody and welcome to our free live class. So remember to join us on a Wednesday at 12 o'clock. If we don't do a live class, we do a pre-recorded class. All these classes are free and they're all step by step, so hopefully it's something that you can copy at home. Now obviously we want you to interact with us, so the best way is let us know where are you watching in from, and as always we like to know what's the weather forecast, not just in Ireland, in the UK and right across the world. If anybody has any questions at all while I'm demonstrating, just post your questions in the comments. Deirdre can call them out to me, and obviously if we don't get to your question, don't worry, as you know, we always respond to every comment, you know what I mean, and interact back with you. Now again, for anyone that hasn't yet took advantage of our free online program on the treatment and conditioning of flowers, okay, it's still available free. There's over 60 different tutorials. It's available for everyone, because a lot of people were asking me, is it only for florists? No, it's available for anyone that loves flowers. So that's all the eligible, I can't say that word. I have a blank on it. Sinead, Deirdre, say it for me.
Eligibility.
Thank you. That's all. To be eligible for the free course, you just need to love flowers. And what I'm going to ask you to do is just in the comments below, just say, can I have the link? I want the link. Give us the link. I'd love the link. Say anything at all. Use the word link and we'll respond back to you. Could be later on this evening. So flower wise, what I'm going to use is the calendula, which probably wouldn't be one of the most popular flowers, okay? Maybe one that you haven't come across. We have covered all the treatment and conditioning in that free online course. But again, in case anybody wants to make a few little notes on it, it's peak around March to May. Comes in this gorgeous vibrant orange, but you can also get it in yellow. It doesn't like a lot of water in the vase, so keep the water shallow, but change it every 2 to 3 days. Make sure that none of the foliage is below the water line, because it does pollute the water. But believe it or not, the leaf itself is used in herbal medicine for skin products. So again, if anybody has any bad skin, I don't know what you're supposed to do with the leaves. You just rub them on your face and hope for the best. I'm not really sure. I'm sure somebody out there probably knows a little bit more than me about it. So comment below. I definitely am interested. The leaf itself, if you smell it, it's kind of like spicy and peppery, you know, that way. It is that little bit kind of unusual. A lot of people ask me, is it related to Germany? The flower does look quite similar, but it's not. And other people say, is it like the marigolds, you know, like the bedding plants, marigolds in the garden? And again, it does look, you know, quite similar. Definitely, you think it definitely is a close cousin, but again, seemingly it's not related. So that's just a little bit of information, because just that's more an unusual type of flower. What I'm also going to add in is a little bit of our bottle brush, but obviously you can use whatever foliage happens to be available. It depends on the season, and obviously if you're doing this arrangement outside season, of course you can substitute these flowers. Whether it's peonies are in season, it'll be brilliant. If hydrangeas are in season, you could do it, like especially for flowers that like a lot of water, because that's where the foam free will work out really well. I'm also going to add in a little bit of this sorghum. I kind of brought it in as a selection of, just we've one there a bit damaged, a selection of grasses, and just to kind of add a little bit of texture. And we have our fabulous bells of Ireland. So they signify good luck. They're just caught in around my calendulas there. So there's our bells of Ireland, absolutely fabulous. And I'm just going to work them with the greens and the oranges. So container wise, we have our container here. And again, like obviously it could be something that you happen to have around the house, or you could go out and purchase one. So with the chicken wire, what I did, so you buy the chicken wire in a garden centre, or you buy it in a building providers, or you could probably buy it in a farmer's co-op, because obviously I'd say that would be the most popular place to buy chicken wire, where farmers would have chickens, okay? They probably use it for other things as well. Just be very, very careful, you know, that way, because the jaggedy edges on it, you know, that way, can cut your hand. And that's why in bridal work, some of the designs that we do, we describe it as using an egg, if you're on module 3 with me. But I use the guppies or the holly chapel pillow instead of actually using chicken wire in bridal work, you know, because I'm always afraid that the jaggedy pieces of wires there could hurt the bride's hand, but also I'd be kind of thinking about the dress. So just to show you, like using your florist scissors, you can just kind of like go along there, and like a little wire snips is probably handier, and then you can kind of cut your chicken wire to whatever size. It depends on the container that you're going to use. And then what I did was I kind of cut across this way. So I have a piece cut already, but I just kind of wanted to show you that it's easy enough to cut it. Maybe wear a pair of gloves, anybody that has very delicate hands. So there we go. That's where you can kind of cut out the piece of chicken wire that you need. And it's easy enough to set it down into the container. So I'll do this one and then I'll show you one that I have organised already. So I kind of find is I kind of go around the edges there and I give it a little bit of a bend, right? And then I'll go along this edge and I'll give that a little bit of a bend. And then I'll go along this one and I'll give that a bit of a bend. And as you bend each side, you kind of straighten out the previous corner. Do you know that way? And that just happens naturally. It's not that you plan to do it, okay? That's just what happens. So I'm kind of getting like this kind of like dome shape, right? And then you're fitting it down into the container and you're buckling and bending and moulding the wire to get it down into it. So be kind of quite rough with it. And all them raw jaggedy pieces of chicken wire have all been pushed down there now. So I know that they're not going to damage me, not going to hurt my hand. And it's easy enough to kind of like mould this chicken wire, you know, that way, like just give it a kind of good press. And like this container is kind of cement or, you know, kind of ceramic. So it's nice and strong. So obviously if you're using like a plastic container, it may not be as secure kind of down inside it. I'm not saying it won't work, you know that way, but the chicken wire itself is quite strong and you just want to make sure that it's really secure down into it. So just as you can see there, kind of done a little bit out of stage and that's it down into the centre of it and that's it there. Just give this one another bit of press down there and that's it down into the centre of that container. And then the next thing you do is you fill it up with water, okay? Now that is the disadvantage of chicken wire or foam-free arrangements, is when you go to transport them, they're absolutely full of water. And people might say, well, you just don't put the water in and tell the customer to fill it up. So you know yourself, even with the foam arrangements, you know that way, most of them don't add water. And then they're contacting you, wondering why the flowers are dead. So there we go, so you can fill that up as much or as little as you want. And like to your customer, there is little stickers that you can buy in the wholesalers and it says, you need a little sex and I need a little water. So you could, obviously depends on the age group of your customer, I suppose. But you could add little stickers or like tell your customer, make sure that you keep that topped up with water. But for anybody that's looking for a display that's a little bit more sustainability and they want to go foam free, this can work out really well. But obviously if you're using a flower that doesn't like foam or won't last so long in foam, this again is an ideal situation. So depending on, like people could be watching this video much later in the year, right? Because obviously once it's up on YouTube, you can like log in and you can watch it from January right through to December and the following year and so on. But maybe if it's hydrangea season, do you know that way, this would be a great idea for a hydrangea arrangement. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of the bottle brush first, okay? So I'd like a nice kind of stem to stand up in the centre. So there we go, we'll stand that one there and secure it in place. And again, if there's any foliage just below the water line, do you know that way, you could remove that and that'll help to keep your water fresh. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit kind of around the outside. Now I have done, just push it to one side so it's not blocking my view, but I have done a couple of these displays, you know that way, using anchor tape or using sellotape, you know what I mean, to give you kind of a couple of ideas of doing foam-free arrangements. And this one obviously is just a little bit more kind of technique, I suppose, involved because of the chicken wire. So we're just adding the stems in among the chicken wire down into the container, do you know that way, and that will kind of hold them secure. Now again, for transporting, there's nothing to guarantee that stuff won't move around, like, and that's what you're up against. But also maybe for florists that have events or, you know, hotels or wedding decoration, they might kind of find like making these in advance can sometimes be, you'd make one in foam easier in advance and you know it's going to be 100% secure then when you go to transport it on site. So started off a little bit of eucalyptus, it could be eucalyptus by the way, but eucalyptus is not available at the moment. So a little bit of bottle brush in the centre, a row of bottle brush around the outside, like big spaces, big gaps kind of in between it, and then a little bit inserted kind of into the middle area. So now I'm going to start off with our calendula. So again, just cutting them on a 45-degree angle, removing any little side shoots, okay? Because again, that can kind of catch the chicken wire when you're sticking them down. So I'm going to place one in the centre to start off with. And then what I'm going to do is place a couple of them around the outside. Now when you're inserting them around the outside, keep an eye on the front and the back of the flower. Or I often call it the happy side. That's the happy side looking up, or the sad side. You see how sad that looks, okay? So make sure when you're inserting them around the outside that you do have the happy side of the flower looking up. So there I am, just inserting it into the chicken wire, down into the water, a little blood broke there, and again allowing it to rest out over the side. Now people often say to me, well, would you not just put them into a vase of water without the chicken wire? And absolutely, you could do that, okay? But the advantage of the chicken wire is that you're able to kind of display the flowers, you know, that way in your vase or in your container. Where normally, if I was to just give you that bunch of flowers, you would just put them down into your vase, and it's kind of like they're plonked down into the vase, and they're not kind of, there's no shape nor make to it. Where again, when you use the chicken wire, you have some amount of control over the outside of the flowers, like where they're going to be displayed. Now again, you'll find, like, take off any of them little side shoots, you know, that way, because again, they can kind of grip the chicken wire or make it a little bit more difficult. Now as you're inserting the flowers, like around the outside, in the centre where all the stems, it's kind of like the stems are crisscrossing, you know that way, and they're making kind of another like little chicken wire kind of effect on the inside. So when I start to insert stems downwards, it'll actually help to grip kind of around that part of the arrangement as well. So again, we're just cutting them on a 45-degree angle, and I'm just inserting them on a slant, using the outside row of chicken wire, you know that way, inserting them on a slant and just letting the flowers kind of like hang naturally towards the outside. And already, like, you could imagine this in the centre of a large dining room table. It could look really well, but again, for maybe a church or a hotel, it'd be absolutely perfect. In a hotel, just kind of struggling here, there's a little grip there in the way. In a hotel, this would be beautiful maybe on a receptionist desk. And again, once the receptionist keeps it well watered, it'll last, you'd probably get to 7 days out of it. Where if you were to use it in foam, you'd be lucky to get the 5 days. Now again, you can add flower food, which I would have had in that vase there, is add some flower food into the water when you're filling up your container, and that'll help to keep your flowers fresh and obviously prolong the longevity of the flower. So there we are, like we have just a couple of flowers going around the outside, and I've one kind of in the centre. I'm still left with 3 stems, and I'm now just going to insert them kind of downwards into the chicken wire and let them kind of come up. I'm just looking for spaces in the arrangement or vase display, and just inserting the flowers kind of down into it, and again just letting the flowers, just kind of turning around, I kind of see the nicer side of it, letting the flower go its own way. This is so simple to do, and this is kind of like the old-fashioned way. Before flower foam became popular, do you know that way? This is how people would have displayed flowers years ago. And I'm not sure what age group we have watching, but if you remember, I remember my mum having one, okay? And she's in her 70s. She used to have like a brass kind of copper ornament sitting on the coffee table, and it was like a low urn shape, and there was like that mesh at the top. And it was actually called a rose bowl. Now we never used it, we never put anything into it. It was literally, we just polished and shined it, and it was an ornament, you know that way. But obviously, like years ago, that's what they did. They put water into it, and again they inserted the rose stems, that's obviously where it got its name. And it kind of created the grid effect, a bit like the chicken wire. So there is our 10 stems so far in our vase. And as I said, when I started off this video and I had the 10 stems in my hand, you know, that sort of way, they were just basically straight up, where you get a much looser effect there. Now what I'm going to do is go in between it with the Bells of Ireland. Now I absolutely love these. These are fabulous. And again, if you download that tutorial I talked about, the online tutorial about the treatment and the conditioning of flowers, you'll get all the information about how to prolong the life of these. Now the Bells of Ireland, you can kind of take the tops off them. I've done it to some of them already. But sometimes you might find like that little tip there is kind of like bent over, like the way the top of the gladdy goes, right? So what I always say to our students is you can just pinch that part off and it straightens up the top of the stem. I had it done to most of these already, but again, if you watch the tutorial, you'll see it all step by step like what I'm doing. So again, I'm working around the outside, and I'm just adding a few, not necessarily in between every one of the calendulas. I'm just adding in a couple of the, just we have a broken bud here, a couple of our Bells of Ireland around the outside, and again it's given a lovely texture, and I just thought the greens with the orange would kind of complement each other. I've used about 6 of them, and I have about, I've actually used 5 because I have 5 left, and there's 10 in a bunch, by the way. So now I'm just going to add a few of them kind of coming up towards the centre. Again, just make sure that you press them down into the chicken wire and make sure that they're tipping the water. Now back to the bells of Ireland. Underneath the calyx of each of the flowers, because it is called a flower, it's not a foliage, even though you might think it's a foliage, but underneath the little calyx, and you probably won't see this on the camera, but there's a tiny little thorn there. Now it's not like a rose thorn, you know, that take the hands off you. But again, you would need to be careful if you were giving them to a bride, maybe in a bridal hand tied, you know, that way that you wouldn't want her catching her hand on it. But like for a normal hand tied bouquet, or even from the florist point of view, there's much sharper things outside there, you know what I mean, for you know, hurting your hands than the little thorn on the bells of Ireland. And again, to allow them, you know, like leave some of the stems long and just let it kind of like bounce up over the top of the arrangement again, I think that can look well. So far in that arrangement, I have 10 stems of the calendula, I have 10 stems of the bells of Ireland, I have 9 because I've just found one more on the table. There's 10 in a bunch, by the way. And what I'm now going to add, I've obviously a little bit of the bottle brush, and next thing I'm going to add in is a little bit of the firegrass. Now I bought a mixture, okay, so there's all types of grasses. This looks a little bit like pampas grass, but it's not. But again, it's going to give us a lovely dimension. Now some of you are watching there and you might say, God, that works out quite expensive buying that grass, because this grass is quite expensive. There's nothing to stop you. This one looks like the seeds, doesn't it? That kind of grows wild in fields. But there's nothing to stop you just using mixtures of foliage, you know, that way. Or again, even just leaving it as it is and just maybe adding, there's another one, isn't that beautiful it is? And maybe just adding a little bit more of the bottle brush or the eucalyptus, depending on what type of year, what time of the year it is. Again, these are all just different kind of variations that was in the bunch. I think I bought 25 stems. I think that was the minimum that I could buy. So it's just to kind of give us little textures. This nearly looks like the barley, you know, that way. So again, just adding a little bit of this here and there. And like any short little bits of bottle brush that's left over can kind of be inserted down low near the chicken wire to help kind of camouflage any bit of chicken wire that still might be showing. So again, I'm just kind of like turning it around, poking around, trying to get kind of down through the chicken wire, through the mesh of stems, you know the way. And these grasses, I think they're beautiful. I remember when we were kids, there was grass like this used to grow in our garden. Now this might be wrong what I'm going to tell you, so I'm prepared to be kind of pulled up. But we used to have a budgie, and my mum used to tell us to go out to the garden and pick that kind of seed. And we used to just rest it on top of the budgie's cage, and he or she, Polly she was, kind of pulled it down into the cage, and it never killed her anyway. Well, it was a long time later before she died, and it, you know, I mean, she seemed to love it. And that to me, when I actually seen that in the bunch, I said, God, that reminded me of the stuff that we used to give Polly. So again, I'm just working my way. This is all just for textures. Now, a lot of you love dried flowers. I'm not mad about dried flowers. I do often use them here at the class, like for demonstrating, but it's definitely not one of my favourites, like dried flowers. But if you had some orange dried flowers and you wanted, like, obviously to complement the colour flowers that you're using, again, I think it would be a nice idea. And some of you are going to say, well, what about the dried flowers going down into the water? The part that's down in the water may go a little bit soggy, you know, that way. But the thing is, once you take it back out of the water, you could reuse it again, because you just basically let it dry out. So again, just adding these in. I haven't been counting them, so if somebody asks me how many stems of this did you use, I don't actually know, but feel free to rewind the video, count while I put it in, and then put the answer in the comments. Again, if anybody has any questions, I know I've been talking away there and haven't been giving you much of a chance, but put any of your questions in the comments. I'll definitely respond back to everybody. I'll go back through them all later on this evening when I get a chance and answer everybody's questions. I'm just looking for another little bit of a bottle bush there to kind of fill in. And there you go. So there's a very simple kind of like wild vase of flowers using the chicken wire, and again, that's what it looks like. And if anybody wants to watch at the very beginning or rewind, because I show you how to actually create our shapes, and again, I could do something that little bit lower down in this container as well. Hope you enjoyed that tutorial. Remember, we'd really appreciate if you clicked share, because that's the whole idea why we come on here on social media to do our free classes. If anybody has any questions about our classes, we will be enrolling for our next lot of courses very soon in the next couple of weeks. So the best thing to do is go to the website and you'll see the calendar, www.floristschoolisland.com, or just drop us an email, info@floristschoolisland.com. So again, anybody that has clicked share, I really appreciate it. Anybody that has interacted with us, again, really appreciate it. Anybody that's kind of maybe planning on copying this display, maybe in the next week or two, the handiest thing to do is share it to your own Facebook page, and then you will be able to find it. You can rewind it, you can fast forward it, and you can listen to it all again. So again, thanks a million. Talk to you all very soon. Don't forget to join us next Wednesday at 12 o'clock again. Bye bye.